The Protection from Scams Bill is an important step forward towards combating this scourge. However, it introduces a significant change to the legal relationship between banks and their customers. Traditionally, banks have acted as fiduciaries with a singular duty of loyalty to their customers, including following specific instructions for financial transactions. This bill, however, empowers the police to issue restriction orders to banks, enabling them to temporarily restrict an individual's banking transactions if there is a reasonable belief that the customer is about to transfer money to a scammer. I believe that this is a justifiable shift given the grave risks posed by scams, including the potential for victims to lose their life savings. However, its effectiveness is contingent upon timely identification and intervention by the authorities, which may not be feasible in all cases. Many scams are executed within minutes, even seconds, leaving no time for third parties to intervene. This makes the bill less effective in these increasingly common high-speed scenarios. May I ask the Minister of State, based on the scam cases that came to the attention of the police over the past year, has the ministry modeled how many restriction orders would have been issued if this bill had already been in effect? To better combat scams, we need more systemic safeguards that stop scams before they start, hold financial institutions, telcos, social media companies, and messaging providers more accountable in preventing scams from taking place on their platforms, and compensate victims if they fail to put in place adequate measures. An independent investigative body should be established to handle scam-related cases pertaining to banks' fulfillment of their SRF obligations. This body would examine evidence provided by the bank, the customer, and any relevant third parties to ensure impartiality and transparency. Such a body would act as a neutral arbiter, removing the inherent conflict of interest in having banks investigate cases where they are an interested party. Additionally, victims should be informed of their rights and available recourse options as part of the investigation outcome report. This includes clear guidance on how to escalate disputes to independent bodies such as FIDREC. Providing this information up front will ensure victims are aware of their options and are not left without avenues for redress if they disagree with the findings of the investigation. Many platforms, including social media, email, and messaging services, as well as telcos and mobile handsets, already offer mechanisms to block and report suspected scams. However, these reports are often siloed, remaining on the user's device or with the platform concerned. There is no centralized scam database to consolidate and share this information. Currently, many scam reports only enter the scam database managed by the Singapore Police Force if the user installs the Scam Shield app and submits a scam through it. This approach is insufficient to crowdsource the collective knowledge of a broader pool of users to identify and report scams as they emerge. To address this, the scam database currently managed by the police should be allowed to receive real-time updates from the banks, telcos, and social media platforms and messaging providers based on user reports, while incorporating robust safeguards to protect privacy. These platforms should then use this shared data for monitoring and proactively blocking scams on their own platforms.
Mr. Gerald Giam asked about the estimated number of restriction orders that would be issued in a year and the potential losses that could have been avoided if we had implemented this earlier. The police do not currently track the number of cases where police officers have been activated to engage potential victims, as well as the number of successful and unsuccessful interventions. Notwithstanding, based on the police's experience, we expect to issue 5 to 10 restriction orders per month, mainly for scam victims. The actual number will depend on the cases that are brought to the police's attention and their assessment of each case. Mr. Gerald Giam also suggested for real-time coordination between the police, MAS, the banks, and other platforms to enhance enforcement against scams. There are ongoing efforts to do so. Since 2022, the ASCOM, Anti-Scam Command, and MAS have worked with the major retail banks in Singapore to co-locate the bank staff with Anti-Scam Command. This has greatly enhanced the bank's real-time coordination with the police to distinguish a scam from a legitimate transaction, trace fund flows, and freeze bank accounts suspected to be involved in scammers' operations. We welcome other stakeholders, including social media platforms, to co-locate within Anti-Scam Command to improve real-time coordination. The police also regularly share observations with banks to improve their fraud detection capabilities. This model has worked well, and we will continue to build upon it to strengthen enforcement against scammers and recovery of scam proceeds. We agree with the suggestion to facilitate the sharing of best practices amongst banks, and we are considering how to do so efficiently and effectively. Ms. Ng Ling Ling and Mr. Gerald Giam raised a number of suggestions to tackle scams, including on the shared responsibility framework, money lock, and kill switch. These are outside the scope of the bill, and MPs may wish to file parliamentary questions on this.
Sir, can I seek some clarifications from MOS? I thank her for responding to some of my proposals just now. The MOS mentioned that the police expect to issue 5 to 10 restriction orders a month, so that's about 60 to 120 a year. But this is negligible compared to the approximately 50,000 scam cases reported annually. Does the MOS agree that this bill will have limited impact on combating scams overall and that more systemic safeguards are needed? Secondly, I thank the MOS for responding to my proposals on sharing between the police and the banks and social media platforms. However, I was not proposing just sharing of best practices, but sharing and collecting data from these social media platforms and requiring them to use that data to prevent scams from taking place in the first place. So is that something that the police are prepared to do?
I thank the member for his 2 points. Firstly, in my opening speech, I had shared that the bill alone will not significantly dent the total number of scams. Yes, and I also mentioned that we'll require a whole society effort and we'll have to work with stakeholders collectively to fight the scourge of scams. That said, when we look at the cases we've encountered, because the cases we are targeting right now are those that involve social engineering, and the cases I have cited, government impersonation scams, love scams, investment scams, we have observed that the losses from these category of scams, especially if they are over a long period of time, can lead to quite large amount of losses. So while in terms of the number of scams that could be deterred through this bill, which, as I mentioned, we approximate it to be between 5 to 10 cases a month, I think we should not neglect the fact that actually the absolute amounts arising from these losses could be substantial. And definitely when we look at it on an individual basis, we could be talking about the loss of lifetime savings. But that said, this is but one of many other methods and many other initiatives we are undertaking to fight the scourge of scams. We should not downplay the importance of public education because at the end of the day, when it comes to socially engineered scams, the best defense really is a discerning public. I'm sorry, could I ask you to repeat the second question?
Was actually seeking a response to a proposal about sharing data between the banks and social media companies and the police. So consolidating all that crowdsourced data to be able to prevent scams from taking place in real time.
Thank you. There is a mechanism whereby different stakeholders share trends that they observe. The only thing I would say is that for some of the social media companies, they have certain data protection laws. And so while they have not disagreed the sharing of information and data that they see and observe, sometimes there is a certain lag time that they have to, because they need to process it on their end, process the information on their end, make sure that the information is in a form that can be shared with external parties, and therefore we see that there could be a lapse in terms of timing when it comes to the sharing of information. But definitely, I think the key principle of sharing information and data between platforms, between stakeholders to tackle the scourge of scams, that principle is something that we all collectively agree with. Thank you.